Have you ever wondered where the Jewish people, one of the world's oldest civilizations, came from? In this episode, we will uncover the ancient origins of the Jews, from nomadic beginnings to the foundation of a global culture. We will explore their early history in the ancient Near East, the significance of figures like Abraham and Moses, the exodus from Egypt, the role of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, and how the Jewish people survived and thrived through exile and diaspora. All this and more in the new episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. To understand the origins of the Jewish people, we need to travel back to the ancient Near East. Around 4,000 years ago, this region was home to some of the world's earliest civilizations. To the east, there was Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, where great city-states like Ur and Babylon rose. To the southwest lay Egypt with its mighty pharaohs and monumental pyramids, and between these two giants was a smaller but no less significant land, Canaan, nestled along the eastern Mediterranean coast. This strip of land would become the birthplace of the Jewish people. These three regions, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Canaan, were deeply connected through trade, culture, and religion. It was a crossroads of ancient life, and it's within this context that the story of the Jewish people begins. According to the Hebrew Bible, the story of the Jewish people begins with one man, Abraham. He lived in the city of Ur, a bustling center of Mesopotamian civilization. But Abraham's journey didn't stop there. In an extraordinary moment, he believed he heard a calling from a single, all-powerful God who told him to leave his home and travel to a new land, Canaan. Abraham obeyed, and this journey from Ur to Canaan is one of the defining moments of Jewish tradition. But what truly set Abraham apart was what happened next. God made a covenant or a sacred agreement with him. In this covenant, God promised to make Abraham the father of a great nation, and in return, Abraham and his descendants would worship only this one God. This covenant is the foundation of Jewish identity. It's the promise that shaped their faith and their future. Abraham's story doesn't end with him. He had two sons, Ishmael, from whom the Arab people are traditionally descended, and Isaac, who would carry on the Jewish lineage. The significance of Isaac is crucial. It's through Isaac's line that the Jewish people trace their ancestry, and his story continues the covenant made with Abraham. Isaac's importance in Jewish tradition can be overstated. He represents the continuation of the promise. Isaac, in turn, had two sons, Esau and Jacob, and it's Jacob, later renamed Israel, who would father the 12 sons that would become the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob's story is full of struggle and perseverance, but ultimately his descendants would lay the foundations for the Jewish people. Each of his 12 sons led a tribe, and together they formed the core of early Israelite society. These tribes would go on to form the nation of Israel, and through their stories, the Jewish people's deep connection to the land of Canaan and their faith in God continue to grow. At a time of severe famine, the family of Jacob, also known as Israel, found refuge in Egypt. Thanks to Jacob's son, Joseph, who had risen to a position of power within the Egyptian government, the Israelites were welcomed. They settled in the fertile land of Goshen, where they prospered and grew in numbers. But as the generations passed, this prosperity would turn into hardship. A new pharaoh rose to power, one who did not remember Joseph or his contributions. Fearing the growing strength and population of the Israelites, Pharaoh enslaved them, forcing them into harsh labor and oppression. The once welcomed family of Israel was now living in bondage. The 12 tribes of Israel, descended from Jacob's sons, were suffering under Egyptian rule. Yet, even in slavery, their identity endured, bound by their shared lineage and the promises made to their ancestors. Their cries for freedom echoed through the land, calling out for deliverance. Deliverance came in the form of a remarkable leader, Moses. Born at a time when Pharaoh had ordered the killing of all Hebrew male infants, Moses' mother placed him in a basket and set him afloat on the Nile to save his life. He was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter and raised as an Egyptian prince. Yet, despite his royal upbringing, Moses could not escape the knowledge of his true identity as a Hebrew. As Moses grew older, he witnessed the suffering of his people. In an act of anger, he killed an Egyptian overseer who was beating a Hebrew slave. Fearing for his life, Moses fled to the desert where he lived as a shepherd. It was in this wilderness that Moses had a life-changing encounter, a burning bush that was not consumed by the flames. From this bush, God spoke to Moses, commanding him to return to Egypt and lead his people to freedom. Moses, with his brother Aaron at his side, confronted Pharaoh with a simple but powerful message: "Let my people go." But Pharaoh's heart was hardened and he refused. In response, Egypt was struck by a series of devastating plagues, each more severe than the last. From rivers of blood to swarms of locusts, Egypt was brought to its knees. Yet Pharaoh continued to resist until the final plague. The 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, was the most devastating of all. The Israelites were spared by marking their doorposts with lamb's blood, and the angel of death passed over their homes. This moment became the origin of the Jewish festival of Passover, commemorating the night when death passed over the Israelites and freedom was within reach. Broken by grief, Pharaoh finally relented and allowed the Israelites to leave. With haste, the Israelites gathered their belongings and left Egypt, marking the end of centuries of slavery. But freedom would not come without further trials. As they journeyed into the wilderness, Pharaoh had a change of heart and sent his army in pursuit. In a miraculous act, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the waters parted, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. The Pharaoh's chariots followed, but the waters came crashing back, drowning the Egyptian army. This dramatic escape was a defining moment in the story of the Jewish people, the moment they became a free nation. The Exodus, as this event is known, is central to Jewish identity. It symbolizes liberation from oppression, divine intervention, and forging of a new destiny. The journey did not end with their escape from Egypt. In the wilderness, the Israelites encountered the most significant moment in their spiritual history, the giving of the law. At the foot of Mount Sinai, Moses ascended to receive the 10 Commandments from God. These laws, carved into stone, would serve as the moral and spiritual foundation of the Jewish people. They outlined the principles that would guide their lives, from their relationship with God to their treatment of one another. Beyond the commandments themselves, this event at Sinai represented a new covenant between God and the Israelites. It was here that the Jewish people were truly forged into a nation, bound not just by ancestry, but by their shared faith and laws. This covenant reaffirmed the unique relationship between the Jewish people and their God, a relationship rooted in the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and now formalized through the law given to Moses. After years of wandering in the wilderness, the Israelites finally reached the land promised to their ancestors, the land of Canaan. Under the leadership of Joshua, they crossed the Jordan River and began their conquest of the land. This period was marked by a series of battles as the Israelites settled in their new home, carving out a space amidst the Canaanite cities and tribes. As the Israelites gained control of Canaan, they began to establish a more settled society. For many years, they lived under a loose tribal system with judges emerging as leaders during time of crisis. But over time, the people desired a more unified, centralized leadership. This led to the establishment of the Israelite monarchy. The first king of Israel was Saul, anointed by the prophet Samuel. Saul's reign, however, was marked by internal strife, and it was his successor, King David, who truly united the tribes into a strong and cohesive kingdom. David is one of the most important figures in Jewish history, not only for his military successes, but for making Jerusalem the political and spiritual heart of the nation. David established Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, a city that would hold immense significance for the Jewish people throughout history. But his contributions didn't end there. David's son, Solomon, inherited a peaceful and prosperous kingdom, and it was during Solomon's reign that the first temple was built. The temple was the crowning achievement of Solomon's reign, and it became the center of Jewish worship. Here, the Ark of the Covenant was housed, and it was the focal point of religious life for the Israelites. The temple symbolized the nation's connection to God, and its construction marked a golden age for the kingdom of Israel. However, this golden age did not last. After Solomon's death, internal tensions and economic strains led to a division of the kingdom. The once united Israel split into two: the northern kingdom, known as Israel, and the southern kingdom, called Judah. This division was both political and religious. In the north, the kingdom of Israel established its capital in Samaria, while in the south, Judah continued to center its religious and political life in Jerusalem. Religious practices began to diverge as well, with the northern kingdom often falling into idol worship, while Judah remained more closely tied to the traditions of the temple in Jerusalem. This split, however, weakened both kingdoms, making them more vulnerable to external threats. The first major blow came in 722 BCE when the mighty Assyrian Empire conquered the northern kingdom of Israel. The Israelites in the north were dispersed, and many were assimilated into the surrounding cultures, leading to the so-called lost tribes of Israel. The southern kingdom of Judah managed to survive for another century and a half, but it too faced its own catastrophe. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian Empire, under King Nebuchadnezzar, invaded Judah, laid siege to Jerusalem, and destroyed Solomon's temple. The city was left in ruins, and the Jewish people were exiled to Babylon. The destruction of the temple and the exile to Babylon were devastating. With their holy city in ruins and their people scattered, it could have been the end of the Jewish identity. But instead, the exile became a transformative moment. It was in this period of exile that the Jewish people began to develop new ways of practicing their faith. They turned to communal worship in synagogues and depended their study of the Torah. After the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BCE, the Jewish people found themselves far from their homeland, exiled to Babylon. For many, this exile represented not just a loss of territory, but a profound spiritual crisis. The Temple of Jerusalem, the heart of their religious life, had been destroyed, and the connection between the Jewish people and their God seemed at risk of being severed. But even in Babylon, the Jewish community found ways to adapt and survive. Without a temple, they turned to new forms of worship, centering their spiritual life around the study of the Torah. It was during this period that the synagogue began to emerge as a place of communal gathering and prayer, allowing the Jews to preserve their religious identity. The Torah became the cornerstone of Jewish life, a sacred text that could be carried and studied anywhere, maintaining a sense of continuity even in exile. Though they were far from their ancestral home, the Jewish people did not forget Jerusalem. They continued to practice their faith, observe the Sabbath, and pass down their traditions to future generations. In this way, exile became more than just a time of mourning. It was a time for spiritual resilience. The Jews learned to survive without a physical temple, carrying their identity within their faith, their laws, and their community. Then, in 539 BCE, a new power rose to dominance, the Persian Empire. Under King Cyrus the Great, Babylon was conquered, and with this conquest came a remarkable moment in Jewish history. Cyrus issued a decree allowing the Jewish exiles to return to their homeland and rebuild their temple. This act of generosity was seen by many Jews as a sign of divine intervention, fulfilling the promises made by the prophets during the years of exile. A significant number of Jews returned to Jerusalem, eager to restore what had been lost. The task before them was immense. Jerusalem lay in ruins, and the temple, once the center of their religious life, had to be rebuilt from its foundations. Despite the challenges, the Second Temple was completed around 516 BCE, and once again, Jerusalem became the heart of Jewish worship. The Second Temple was not just a physical rebuilding, it symbolized a spiritual renewal for the Jewish people. But when did they truly become Jews? The earliest Jewish identity as we understand it today likely began forming during the Babylonian exile and the subsequent return. Before this, they were more accurately referred to as Israelites or Judahites. The term Jew itself, derived from Judah, became more prominent after the fall of the Northern Kingdom and especially after the return from Babylon. This journey from Abraham's migration to the Israelites establishing their home in Canaan marks the origin of the Jewish people. It's a story of resilience, faith, and unity that continues to resonate through the ages. The identity formed during these early years not only shaped the Jewish experience, but also had a profound impact on world history, influencing cultures, religions, and societies across the globe. If you found this exploration of the origins of the Jewish people insightful, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more similar content. Which origin story should we cover next? Please share with us in the comments. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again.